I woke up shivering on the coldest morning Fort Worth had seen in 15 years, reaching for my heated blanket only to find empty air where it should have been. My name is Nathan Fletcher, and I have a condition called Raynaud's phenomenon that makes my hands and feet lose circulation in cold weather. Without proper heat management, my fingers turn white, then blue, and the pain becomes unbearable. That heated blanket wasn't just a comfort item. It was medical equipment prescribed by my neurologist, Dr. Sandra Morrison at Texas Regional Medical Center. I'd lived in Willow Creek Estates for 3 years, and while I'd had my share of run-ins with our HOA president, Patricia Henderson, nothing prepared me for what I was about to discover. I stumbled out of bed, my feet already aching from the cold that had seeped through the house overnight. The thermostat read 48 degrees. I cranked it up to 72, but I knew it would take hours for my old heating system to catch up. The power had flickered on and off during the night, and I'd wrapped myself in the heated blanket around 2 in the morning when the temperature inside dropped below 50. I distinctly remembered plugging it in by my bedside before I finally fell asleep around 4. Now it was gone. I searched my bedroom, thinking maybe I'd kicked it off in my sleep. Nothing. I checked the bathroom, the hallway, even the living room. My hands were already starting to hurt, that familiar tingling sensation that warned me I needed to warm up fast. I grabbed a pair of thermal gloves from my dresser and pulled on 2 pairs of socks, but I knew from experience that wouldn't be enough. I needed that blanket. That's when I noticed my back door was slightly ajar. I lived alone in a small ranch-style house on Maple Drive, and I was obsessive about locking my doors. Growing up in Detroit taught me that much. I approached the door slowly, my heart pounding. Had someone broken in? But nothing else seemed disturbed. My television was still mounted on the wall, my laptop sat on the kitchen table, and my wallet was right where I'd left it on the counter. I stepped outside into the freezing air, and that's when I saw the note taped to my patio chair. Violation notice. Unauthorized electrical usage during neighborhood power conservation period. Item confiscated per HOA Bylaws Section 7.3.2. Retrieved from HOA office during business hours. Patricia Henderson, HOA President. My blood boiled despite the cold. Patricia had entered my house and taken my medical equipment. Not only was that theft, but it was potentially dangerous to my health. I'd dealt with Patricia's nonsense before. She'd cited me for leaving my trash cans out 30 minutes past the designated time. She'd sent me a violation notice because my grass was allegedly half an inch too tall, even though I'd measured it myself. She'd even tried to fine me $200 because my mailbox was weathered and needed repainting, though it looked identical to half the mailboxes on the street. But this crossed every line. I pulled out my phone and called the HOA office. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. You've reached the Willow Creek Estates HOA office. Our hours are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Please leave a message. I checked my phone. It was Saturday, 7:30 in the morning. My fingers were already going numb despite the gloves. I needed that blanket now, not Monday morning. I called Patricia's personal number, which I had from a neighborhood directory. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice sugary sweet. Patricia Henderson speaking. Patricia, this is Nathan Fletcher from Maple Drive. You took my heated blanket from my house last night. I confiscated unauthorized equipment being used during a power conservation emergency. Yes, you received proper notice. You broke into my house and stole medical equipment. That blanket was prescribed by my doctor. I have a circulation condition. Her tone shifted to that condescending voice she used whenever anyone challenged her authority. Mr. Fletcher, during severe weather events, The HOA has the right to enforce conservation measures to prevent neighborhood-wide power failures. Your excessive electrical usage was detected by our monitoring system. The bylaws clearly state that non-essential electrical items can be temporarily confiscated. Non-essential. It's medical equipment. You should have filed the proper paperwork declaring it as such. According to our records, you have no registered medical equipment exemption. I wanted to scream. I didn't know I needed to register my medical equipment with the HOA. That's insane. I need that blanket back right now. My hands are already losing circulation. The office will be open Monday at 9. You can retrieve your item then, provided you pay the $50 retrieval fee and submit the proper medical equipment exemption forms in triplicate. Monday. It's Saturday morning. The forecast says this freeze is lasting through Tuesday. Patricia, I could end up in the hospital. That sounds rather dramatic, Mr. Fletcher. Perhaps you should wear warmer clothing. I really must go. I have a very full schedule today. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen, shaking with anger and cold. My hands were definitely getting worse. I could see my fingertips turning pale. I had maybe an hour before the pain became severe. I needed to make a decision. Option 1, go to the hospital. But that meant sitting in an emergency room for hours, racking up thousands in medical bills, and even then, they'd just warm me up and send me home with the same advice my neurologist already gave me. Keep warm, use heated blankets, avoid cold exposure. Option 2, drive to Patricia's house and demand my property back. I chose option 2. I knew where Patricia lived because everyone in Willow Creek Estates knew. She had the biggest house on Oakmont Circle, a gaudy 2-story colonial with 4 white pillars and a perfectly manicured lawn that she bragged about constantly at HOA meetings. I'd only been to 2 meetings before I stopped going because listening to Patricia drone on about grass height regulations and approved paint colors made me want to bang my head against the wall. I climbed into my truck, cranked the heat to maximum, and drove the half-mile to her house. It was 8 in the morning now, and the streets were nearly empty. Most of my neighbors were sensibly staying inside during the freeze. The radio said it was 17 degrees outside with a wind chill of 5. The newscaster warned everyone to stay home if possible and check on elderly neighbors. Patricia's house looked like something out of a magazine. Not a single icicle hung from her gutters. Her driveway was already perfectly cleared of ice. Her Christmas lights, which should have been taken down weeks ago by her own HOA regulations, were still up and twinkling. I parked in her driveway and walked to her front door, rang the doorbell. I could hear it chiming inside, some elaborate melody that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. She opened the door wearing a cream-colored sweater and perfectly pressed slacks. Her blonde hair was styled in that severe bob that seemed to be required for all HOA presidents. She looked at me with barely concealed annoyance. Mr. Fletcher, I already told you the office hours. And I already told you I need my medical equipment back right now. You had no right to enter my house. I have every right. Section 7.3.2 of the bylaws grants the HOA emergency access to all properties during crisis situations. Show me that in writing. She sighed dramatically. Fine. Wait here. She closed the door in my face. I stood on her porch, my hands throbbing now. I shoved them in my armpits, trying to keep them warm. A few minutes later, she returned with a thick binder. She flipped to a marked page and pointed. Right there. In the event of a community emergency, including but not limited to power failures, natural disasters, or public health crises, the HOA board reserves the right to enter any property for the purpose of preserving community resources or preventing damage to shared infrastructure. I read it carefully. That says nothing about confiscating personal property. It says we can prevent damage to shared infrastructure. Your excessive power usage was threatening the entire neighborhood's electrical grid. That's impossible. A heated blanket uses maybe 200 watts. That's less than a television. Nevertheless, our monitoring showed excessive usage from your address. What monitoring? How are you monitoring my power usage? She closed the binder. We had smart meters installed last year. All residents were notified. I vaguely remembered some letter about meter upgrades, but I'd assumed it was from the power company, not the HOA. Even if that's true, you still stole my property. I want it back right now or I'm calling the police. Her expression hardened. Go ahead. I've already spoken with Officer Reynolds this morning. He's aware of the situation and agrees that the HOA acted within our rights. That stopped me. Officer Reynolds was the neighborhood patrol cop, and I'd seen him chatting with Patricia at neighborhood events. They seemed friendly. Maybe too friendly. I don't care what Officer Reynolds says. What you did is theft and breaking and entering. I used the emergency access provided by the bylaws. That's not breaking and entering, and I didn't steal anything. I confiscated it temporarily. Huge difference. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things to do. She started to close the door, but I put my hand against it. Patricia, please. I'm not trying to cause problems. I genuinely need that blanket. My hands are already going numb. I could suffer permanent nerve damage. For just a moment, I thought I saw something in her expression. Maybe concern, maybe understanding, but it vanished quickly. Then perhaps you should have followed the proper procedures. File the exemption paperwork and you can have your blanket back. It's Saturday. Where do I even get the paperwork? The forms are available on our website. You can fill them out and email them to me. Once I verify your medical condition with your doctor's office, which will take 3 to 5 business days, and the board votes on your exemption at our next monthly meeting, which isn't until February 15th, you'll be approved. February 15th. That's 3 weeks away. That's when the next board meeting is scheduled. We follow proper procedures here, Mr. Fletcher. My hands were really hurting now. I pulled them out of my armpits and held them up. My fingertips were white. Look at this. This is what happens to me in the cold. It's called Raynaud's phenomenon. If I don't warm up soon, I could lose feeling in my fingers permanently. She glanced at my hands and I saw her swallow. That looks quite unpleasant. However, I'm not a doctor, and I can't just violate our bylaws based on your word. Bring me documentation from your physician, and we can expedite the process. My doctor's office is closed until Monday. Then I suppose you'll need to manage until then. Perhaps go to an urgent care center and tell them what? That my HOA president stole my medical equipment. I didn't steal anything. Her voice rose. Stop saying that. I confiscated unauthorized equipment per the bylaws that you agreed to when you purchased your home. If you don't like our rules, you're free to sell your house and move elsewhere. A man appeared behind her. He was tall, balding, wearing a bathrobe. Honey, who is it? Just a neighbor with a complaint, Richard. I'm handling it. Richard, her husband, looked at me with barely concealed contempt. Maybe you should handle it Monday during office hours. We're trying to have breakfast. Maybe your wife shouldn't steal people's medical equipment. I shot back. Richard's face reddened. Watch your tone. Patricia works very hard to keep this neighborhood running smoothly. If you can't follow simple rules, that's your problem. My problem is that my hands are going numb because she took my heated blanket. Then wear gloves. Richard started to close the door. I was desperate now. Please, just give me the blanket back. I'll fill out whatever forms you want. I'll pay whatever fees you want. Just please give it back. Patricia's expression was stone cold. Monday at 9. Don't come back to my house before then, or I'll call the police and report you for harassment." The door slammed in my face. I stood there for a moment, shocked. Then I pulled out my phone and called 911. If she wanted to involve the police, fine. "Let's involve the police," the dispatcher answered. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a theft. My HOA president broke into my house and stole my medical equipment. Sir, is this a medical emergency? Are you injured? I have a medical condition that requires a heated blanket. She took it from my house last night while I was sleeping. Okay, sir. I'm going to transfer you to the non-emergency line. Wait, she broke into my house. That's breaking and entering. Did she damage your property or threaten you? No, but she entered without permission and took something. And she's your HOA president? Yes. There was a pause. Sir, this sounds like a civil matter. I'm transferring you to non-emergency. The line clicked and I was put on hold. I waited 5 minutes before someone answered. Fort Worth Police non-emergency line, how can I help you? I explained the situation again. The officer on the phone listened patiently. So she's saying she had permission to enter based on your HOA agreement? Yes, but that can't be legal, can it, sir? I'm not a lawyer. If your HOA agreement grants them emergency access, that might be legal. You'd need to check with an attorney. As for the property she took, if she's saying it's temporarily confiscated and you can retrieve it, that's probably a civil matter, not criminal. But it's my medical equipment, I need it. Have you tried talking to her about the medical nature of the item? Yes. She doesn't care. She says I need to file paperwork and wait for a board meeting, the officer sighed. Look, I understand you're frustrated. But unless she's refusing to ever return your property, or there's evidence of criminal intent, this really sounds like something you need to resolve through the HOA process, or take to civil court. You could try talking to a lawyer about getting an emergency injunction. A lawyer. It's Saturday morning during a freeze. Where am I going to find a lawyer? I'm sorry, sir. That's the best advice I can give you. If you feel you're in medical danger, go to the emergency room. I hung up, feeling defeated. My hands were throbbing now, the pain sharp and deep. I looked at Patricia's house. Somewhere inside was my blanket. I could probably break in and take it back. But then I'd actually be committing a crime and Patricia would definitely press charges. I drove home, my mind racing. I needed to warm up fast. I ran hot water in my bathtub and soaked my hands, which helped temporarily. The pain lessened and color returned to my fingers, but I couldn't stay in the bathtub forever. I searched my house for anything that could help. I found an old heating pad in my closet, the kind you put in the microwave. It helped a little, but it only stayed warm for about 20 minutes at a time. I ended up microwaving it every half hour, holding it against my chest, my hands tucked underneath. I spent Saturday researching HOAs and property rights. What I found was disturbing. In Texas, HOAs had broad authority. They could fine residents, place liens on houses, even foreclose for unpaid fines. The agreements were legally binding contracts. If the bylaws really did grant emergency access, Patricia might technically be in the right. But taking medical equipment, that had to cross some line. I found a lawyer's website that mentioned HOA disputes. They had an emergency contact number. I called it, expecting voicemail, but a man answered. Dawson Legal Services. This is Mark Dawson. Mr. Dawson, I'm sorry to bother you on a Saturday. I'm having an emergency situation with my HOA. I explained everything. He listened without interrupting. Okay, he said when I finished. First, what she did is definitely problematic, possibly illegal. Emergency access clauses are meant for situations like water leaks or fire hazards, not for confiscating property. Second, Taking medical equipment could constitute theft regardless of the bylaws. Third, I can file for an emergency temporary restraining order and demand the immediate return of your property. How fast can that happen? I can file the paperwork Monday morning. We might get a hearing as early as Tuesday. Tuesday, I need it back today. I understand, but the courts are closed on weekends. My hands are tied until Monday. In the meantime, document everything. Take pictures of your hands showing the condition. Get a statement from your doctor about your medical need for the blanket. Save all communications with the HOA president. How much will this cost? My retainer for HOA disputes is $3,000. I felt sick. I didn't have $3,000 sitting around. I'll have to think about it. I understand. Call me Monday if you decide to proceed. I hung up and immediately called my doctor's office. As expected, voicemail. I left a detailed message explaining the situation and asking for a written statement about my medical needs. By Saturday afternoon, my hands were in bad shape. Despite my best efforts with the heating pad and hot water soaks, my fingers were staying pale. The pain was constant. I knew from past episodes that I was risking real damage if this continued for days. I tried calling Patricia again. No answer. I sent her an email, begging her to reconsider. No response. I drove to a medical supply store and bought a new heated blanket. It cost $90 I didn't have, but I was desperate. I brought it home, plugged it in, and wrapped myself up. The warmth was immediate and glorious. My hands slowly returned to normal color, and the pain began to fade. Then, around 8 that evening, my power went out. I sat in the dark, wrapped in my now useless blanket, and wanted to scream. The power company had implemented rolling blackouts to manage the load during the freeze. I called their emergency line and was told my area would be without power for approximately 4 hours. I couldn't stay here. I grabbed my wallet, my phone charger, and the new heated blanket and drove to the nearest hotel. Every single one was sold out. The freeze had brought people out in droves, looking for guaranteed heating and electricity. I tried 6 hotels before giving up. I ended up at a 24-hour diner, nursing cups of hot coffee and keeping my hands wrapped around the warm mug. The waitress, a kind woman named Rosa, noticed my hands. "You okay, honey? I have a circulation problem. I'm just trying to stay warm." "That's awful. This cold snap is no joke. They're saying it might hit single digits tonight." I stayed at that diner until after midnight, when my phone buzzed with a notification that power was restored to my neighborhood. I drove home, plugged in my new blanket, and finally managed to sleep. Sunday morning, I woke up to find a new violation notice taped to my door. Second violation: excessive electrical usage during conservation period. This is your final warning. Third violation will result in immediate utility disconnection per bylaws section 7.3.5. Your smart meter showed unauthorized usage of high-draw electrical equipment between 8:42 p.m. and 12:17 a.m. Fine, $250. Pay within 48 hours to avoid additional penalties. I couldn't believe it. She was fining me for using a heated blanket during a freeze and threatening to disconnect my utilities. I called my buddy Marcus from work. He was the only person I knew who might understand legal stuff, having gone through a nasty divorce that involved lots of lawyers. "Marcus, I need advice. My HOA president is insane." I explained everything. Marcus listened, occasionally interjecting with disbelieving comments. "Dude, that's messed up. Like, seriously messed up. She can't disconnect your utilities. That's got to be illegal. She's saying it's in the bylaws." "I don't care what the bylaws say. Some things supersede contracts. You can't sign away your right to basic utilities." Look, my divorce lawyer was good. His firm handles all kinds of cases. Let me text you his number. Call him first thing Monday. I talked to another lawyer yesterday. He wants $3,000. Yeah, that's about right. But trust me, if this Patricia person is as crazy as you say, you're going to need a lawyer. She's going to make your life hell otherwise. These HOA power trip people don't stop until someone forces them to. Marcus sent me the number. I thanked him and spent the rest of Sunday trying to stay warm and documenting everything. I took pictures of my hands. I photographed the violation notices. I screenshotted my emails to Patricia. I also spent time reading through my HOA bylaws carefully. Most of it was standard stuff about property maintenance and architectural guidelines, but there were sections that seemed incredibly overreaching. The emergency access clause Patricia cited did exist, but it was vague. Section 7.3.5 did mention the HOA's ability to restrict utility usage during emergencies to preserve community resources, but it didn't specifically say they could disconnect someone's utilities. Monday morning, I called my doctor's office the moment they opened. Texas Regional Medical Center, Dr. Morrison's office. Hi, this is Nathan Fletcher. I'm a patient of Dr. Morrison's. I left a message Saturday about needing documentation of my Raynaud's condition. Oh yes, Mr. Fletcher. Dr. Morrison saw your message. She's actually quite concerned. Can you come in today, really? I didn't think she'd have an opening. She's making time. She said if your HOA took your heated blanket during this freeze, that's a serious medical issue. Can you be here at 11? Absolutely. Thank you. I then called the lawyer Marcus recommended, Jonathan Pierce. Pierce and Associates, how may I direct your call? I need to speak with Jonathan Pierce about an HOA dispute. One moment, please. A minute later, a man with a deep, authoritative voice came on the line. This is Jonathan Pierce. I explained my situation for what felt like the 100th time. Unlike the other lawyer, Pierce interrupted frequently with questions. Did you sign the HOA agreement when you purchased the house? Yes, but I didn't really read it in detail. My real estate agent said it was standard. They always say that. Did the HOA president physically enter your home, or did she have someone else do it? I assume she did it herself. The note was signed by her. And you have documentation of your medical condition. I'm seeing my doctor at 11 today to get a formal statement. Good. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to draft a cease and desist letter to your HOA president, demanding the immediate return of your property and threatening legal action for theft, breaking and entering, and endangering your health. I'll also send a letter to the HOA board informing them of potential liability. If that doesn't work, we'll file for an emergency restraining order and sue for damages. How much will this cost? My retainer is $2,500. But given the circumstances, I'm willing to work on a contingency basis if we end up suing. If we win, which I think we will, I'll take 30% of whatever we recover. That means you pay nothing unless we win. Why are you willing to do that? Because what happened to you is outrageous, and I hate bullies. Especially HOA bullies who think they can do whatever they want. I've handled a dozen cases like this, and I've won every single one. These people bank on homeowners being too intimidated or too broke to fight back. But you're fighting back, and I'm going to help you. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Thank you. What do I need to do? Come to my office this afternoon if you can. Bring all your documentation. In the meantime, I'm going to draft those letters and have them delivered today by process server. Where's the HOA office? I gave him the address. We scheduled a meeting for 2 o'clock. At 11, I sat in Dr. Morrison's office. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She examined my hands carefully. "Tell me exactly what happened," I explained. Her expression grew increasingly angry. "Nathan, you know how serious Raynaud's can be. Without proper temperature regulation, you risk permanent nerve damage, tissue death, and chronic pain. That heated blanket wasn't a luxury. It was medical equipment as necessary as someone's insulin or heart medication." That's what I tried to tell her. "I'm writing you a detailed letter explaining your condition and the medical necessity of the heated blanket. I'm also noting that confiscating it during a severe freeze was recklessly endangering your health. If you'd like, I can also serve as an expert witness if this goes to court. It might." I hired a lawyer. Good. This woman needs to be held accountable. I'm also going to report this to the medical board. If an HOA thinks they can interfere with prescribed medical treatments, that sets a terrifying precedent. She printed out a 2-page letter on official letterhead, detailing my condition, the prescribed treatment, and her professional opinion that Patricia's actions constituted a serious threat to the patient's health and well-being. Armed with that letter, I drove to Jonathan Pierce's office in downtown Fort Worth. His firm occupied the 10th floor of a glass office building. The receptionist directed me to a conference room where Pierce was waiting. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp features and expensive-looking suit. He shook my hand firmly. "Nathan, good to meet you. Let's see what we've got." I laid out all my documentation. The violation notices, photos of my hands, my HOA agreement, Dr. Morrison's letter, and a timeline of events. Pierce studied everything carefully, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "This is even worse than I thought. She entered your home without permission at 2 in the morning, took medical equipment, and then threatened you with utility disconnection and more fines when you tried to replace it. The doctor's letter is gold. This explicitly states you could suffer permanent damage. So what happens now?" I've already had the letters delivered to Patricia Henderson and the HOA board. They were served an hour ago. The letter gives them until 5 p.m. today to return your original blanket, rescind all fines, and provide written assurance that they won't interfere with your medical equipment again. If they don't comply, we file in court tomorrow morning. Do you think they'll comply? Hard to say. If they have any sense, yes. If Patricia's as stubborn as she seems, no. Either way, we're prepared. At 4 p.m., Pierce called me. "You're not going to believe this." "What happened?" "Patricia's husband, Richard Henderson, just called my office. He's threatening to sue us for harassment and defamation. He claims our letter contained false statements and that we're engaged in a conspiracy to damage his wife's reputation. That's insane. It's also meaningless. He has no grounds, but it tells me Patricia isn't backing down. She's doubling down, which is actually good for us because it shows a pattern of unreasonable behavior. We're filing the emergency motion tomorrow morning." "What about my blanket? Do you still have the new one?" "Yes." "Keep using it. Document every time you use it and any problems you have. If your power goes out again or you get another violation notice, let me know immediately." That night, sure enough, another violation notice appeared on my door. 3rd violation. Final warning. Your continued use of prohibited high-draw electrical equipment has resulted in this final notice. Per Bylaws Section 7.3.5, your electrical service will be temporarily suspended beginning Wednesday, February 1st, until conservation period ends. This is necessary to preserve community infrastructure. Contact HOA office to discuss compliance. I took a picture and immediately sent it to Pierce. He called me back within minutes. They're actually going to disconnect your power during a freeze with your medical condition. That's what it says. Okay, This just moved from civil dispute to potential criminal endangerment. I'm calling the district attorney's office first thing tomorrow. What she's doing could be considered reckless endangerment or even assault. This is beyond HOA overreach. This is dangerous. Tuesday morning, Pierce filed our emergency motion. At the same time, he met with an assistant district attorney named Sarah Kimball. I wasn't present for that meeting, but Pierce called me afterward. The DA's office is very interested. Kimball is sending investigators to interview you, Patricia, and the HOA board. They're treating this as a potential criminal matter. Really, Nathan, think about it. She broke into your home while you were sleeping, stole medical equipment, and is now threatening to cut off your power during a deadly freeze. If you ended up in the hospital or died because of this, she could be charged with manslaughter. The DA wants to get ahead of this before something terrible happens. That afternoon, 2 investigators showed up at my house. Detective James Wu and Detective Lisa Chen, both from the Fort Worth Police Department's White-Collar Crimes Division. Mr. Fletcher, we need to ask you some questions about your HOA president, Patricia Henderson. I told them everything. They took notes, photographed the violation notices, and interviewed me for over an hour. Has she done anything else unusual or concerning? Detective Chen asked. I mean, she's always been strict about HOA rules, but nothing like this. We're going to interview your neighbors as well. We want to know if there's a pattern of behavior. After they left, I felt oddly nervous. I hadn't expected this to become a police investigation, but Pierce was right. What Patricia did was dangerous. If I'd been elderly or had a more serious condition, I could have died. That evening, my neighbor from across the street, an elderly man named George, knocked on my door. Nathan, the police were just at my house asking about Patricia Henderson. What's going on? I explained the situation. George's expression darkened. That woman is a menace. She tried to fine me $500 last year because my grandson's car was parked on the street overnight. Said it was an eyesore. It was a Toyota Camry. I had to threaten to sue before she backed down. Did you tell the detectives that? I told them everything. I also told them about how she tried to have the Martin family's dog taken away because it barked during the day, and how she had Tom Bradley's vegetable garden destroyed because she said it violated the landscaping rules, even though there was nothing in the bylaws about vegetable gardens. I hadn't known about any of that. Why didn't anyone ever complain to the board? Patricia is the board. She handpicks everyone who runs. Nobody opposes her because she makes their lives hell if they do. Last person who tried to run against her got cited for violations every single week until he gave up and moved away. That's insane. That's Patricia. Listen, if you're fighting her, good for you. A lot of us have wanted to for years but didn't have the guts. If you need anything, character witnesses or whatever, let me know. Wednesday morning, I woke up to a text from Pierce. Emergency hearing scheduled for 2 p.m. today. Be at the courthouse at 1:30. I dressed in my best clothes, a button-down shirt and slacks, and drove to the Tarrant County Courthouse. Pierce met me in the lobby. Okay, here's what's happening. We're in front of Judge Margaret Sullivan. She's known for not tolerating nonsense. I've laid out our case, and the HOA has responded with a motion to dismiss, claiming this is outside the court's jurisdiction because it's an internal HOA matter. Will that work? Not a chance. We're not just dealing with HOA bylaws anymore. We're dealing with theft, breaking and entering, and potential criminal endangerment. Judge Sullivan will see right through their argument. In the courtroom, I saw Patricia for the first time since Saturday. She was dressed in a conservative suit, her hair perfect as always. She sat next to a lawyer, a stern-looking man in his 60s. Her husband Richard was there too, sitting in the gallery behind her. Judge Sullivan entered and everyone stood. She was a black woman in her 50s with an air of authority that filled the room. "Please be seated. We're here on an emergency motion filed by Nathan Fletcher against Patricia Henderson and the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. Mr. Pierce, you filed this motion. Make your case." Pierce stood. "Your Honor, the facts are simple. The defendant, Mrs. Henderson, entered my client's home without permission in the early morning hours, removed medical equipment prescribed by his doctor for a serious circulation condition, refused to return it despite being informed of its medical necessity, and has now threatened to disconnect his electrical service during a severe freeze. These actions constitute theft, breaking and entering, and reckless endangerment of Mr. Fletcher's health." The HOA lawyer stood. "Your Honor, if I may. My client, Mrs. Henderson, acted within the authority granted to her by the HOA bylaws, which Mr. Fletcher agreed to when he purchased his home. She entered the property using emergency access provisions during a community-wide power crisis. She temporarily confiscated equipment that was causing excessive electrical draw, and she has offered to return the item once proper procedures are followed. This is an internal HOA matter, not a criminal matter." Judge Sullivan looked at both lawyers. "I've reviewed the filings. Let me ask a few questions. Mrs. Henderson, did you physically enter Mr. Fletcher's home?" Patricia stood. "Yes, Your Honor, under the emergency access provisions." "At what time?" "Approximately 2 a.m. "Was Mr. Fletcher aware you were entering?" "No, Your Honor, he was asleep." "Did you notify him before or immediately after entering?" "I left a violation notice explaining the situation. But you didn't wake him or call him." "I didn't want to disturb him." Judge Sullivan's expression was skeptical. "You entered someone's home at 2 a.m. while they were sleeping, took their property, and left a note. Does that really sound reasonable to you?" Patricia's lawyer stood quickly. "Your Honor, the bylaws explicitly grant emergency access." "I've read the bylaws, counsel. Emergency access provisions are typically meant for situations like water leaks or fires, not for confiscating electric blankets." "Mr. Fletcher, did you consent to this entry?" I stood. "No, Your Honor, I had no idea she was coming into my house." "And you have a medical condition that requires this heated blanket?" "Yes, Your Honor, I have Raynaud's phenomenon." Dr. Morrison provided a letter explaining the condition. Judge Sullivan reviewed the doctor's letter. Her expression hardened. "This letter states you could suffer permanent nerve damage without proper heat management. Mrs. Henderson, were you aware of his medical condition when you took the blanket?" Patricia hesitated. "No, Your Honor, he didn't have the proper exemption forms on file." "So your position is that people need to register their medical equipment with the HOA, and if they don't, you can take it. The bylaws require documentation for exemptions. I'm asking about common sense and human decency. If someone tells you they need medical equipment and shows signs of a medical condition, do you really think paperwork takes priority?" Patricia's lawyer jumped in again. "Your Honor, the HOA has to enforce rules consistently. If they make exceptions without proper documentation, it creates problems." Judge Sullivan looked at him coldly. "What it creates, counsel, is liability for your client. Here's my ruling. Mrs. Henderson, you will immediately return Mr. Fletcher's original heated blanket. All fines against him are rescinded. You will not disconnect his utilities under any circumstances. You will not enter his property again without his explicit written consent. And you will revise your HOA bylaws to include proper procedures for medical equipment exemptions that don't require board approval. Do you understand?" Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. "Your Honor, with respect, The board needs to approve any policy changes. Then call an emergency board meeting. You have 1 week. Mr. Pierce, I'm granting your motion. I'm also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution. Mrs. Henderson, I strongly suggest you consult with your lawyer about your potential criminal liability here. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Pierce turned to me with a smile. That went better than I expected. Patricia and her lawyer huddled in conversation. I could see her face reddening, her voice rising even though I couldn't hear the words. Richard joined them and the three argued quietly. As we left the courtroom, Patricia intercepted us in the hallway. This isn't over. Pierce stepped between us. Mrs. Henderson, I strongly advise you not to threaten my client. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply saying the HOA board will review this situation and take appropriate action. The judge just ruled against you. There's nothing to review. The judge can't rewrite our bylaws. We'll appeal this decision. Go ahead and try. In the meantime, return Mr. Fletcher's property today as ordered. Patricia glared at me. You've made a huge mistake. You think you can just ignore the rules everyone else follows. I think I have the right to use medical equipment in my own home without the HOA president breaking in and stealing it, I said. I didn't break in, and I didn't steal anything. Pierce pulled out his phone. This conversation is being recorded. Please continue explaining how you didn't break into Mr. Fletcher's home. Patricia's lawyer grabbed her arm. Don't say another word. Let's go. They walked away, Richard following behind them while shooting me angry looks. Pierce turned to me. That woman has serious control issues. But we won. Your blanket should be returned by end of day. What about the criminal investigation? That's separate. The detectives will continue their investigation. If they find enough evidence, the DA will file charges. That's out of our hands now. I went home feeling vindicated but also nervous. Patricia didn't seem like someone who would let this go easily. Sure enough, around 6 p.m. there was a knock on my door. It was Richard Henderson holding my heated blanket. Here, he said, shoving it at me. You happy now? You've humiliated my wife in court, you've caused her incredible stress, and you've damaged her reputation in the community. She stole my medical equipment. What did you expect me to do? She was doing her job, trying to keep this neighborhood running during a crisis. But you had to make it all about you. It is all about me when she takes my medical equipment. You know what? People like you are why HOAs exist. Someone has to enforce the rules or neighborhoods fall apart. Patricia has dedicated countless hours to keeping Willow Creek Estates beautiful and functional. She doesn't get paid for this. She does it because she cares. She broke into my house. She used emergency access during an emergency. That's completely different. I was done arguing. Thank you for returning my property. Please leave. Richard stepped closer, his voice dropping. You better hope nothing happens to Patricia because of this. If she gets charged with some crime because of your lies, you'll regret it. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Actions have consequences. He turned and walked away. I closed the door and immediately called Pierce to tell him about the conversation. That's witness intimidation, Pierce said. I'm adding that to our file. If he contacts you again, call the police immediately. Over the next few days, things got weird in the neighborhood. I started noticing cars parked outside my house at odd hours. My mailbox was vandalized, the post bent and the box dented. Someone left a bag of dog feces on my doorstep. My trash cans were knocked over multiple times. I couldn't prove it was Patricia or Richard, but the timing was suspicious. I installed security cameras and documented everything. The following week, Detective Wu called me. Mr. Fletcher, we've completed our investigation. We interviewed 24 residents in your neighborhood. The pattern we found is disturbing. What do you mean? Patricia Henderson has been systematically harassing residents who challenge her authority. We found evidence of retaliatory fines, harassment, property damage, and in one case, filing a false police report against a resident. We're recommending criminal charges. What kind of charges? Theft, breaking and entering, criminal trespass, harassment, abuse of authority, and potentially stalking. The DA is reviewing our report now. 2 days later, the news broke. Patricia Henderson was arrested at her home on multiple charges. The local news covered it extensively because it was such an unusual case. HOA president arrested for theft and harassment. It became a minor sensation on social media. I watched the news coverage from my living room, wrapped in my heated blanket. Part of me felt guilty. I hadn't wanted to destroy Patricia's life. I just wanted my property back. But then I remembered how she dismissed my medical condition, how she'd threatened me, how Richard had intimidated me. These weren't good people. They were bullies who'd been allowed to operate unchecked for years. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Patricia as president. A new election was scheduled. Several neighbors reached out to thank me for standing up to her. George from across the street brought me a casserole. "You did the neighborhood a favor," he said. Patricia needed to be stopped. The criminal case moved slowly. Patricia pleaded not guilty to all charges. Her lawyer argued she'd acted in good faith based on her understanding of the bylaws. The prosecutor argued she'd knowingly exceeded her authority and endangered someone's health. Pierce also filed a civil lawsuit on my behalf, seeking damages for emotional distress, medical expenses, and attorney fees. The HOA's insurance company tried to settle quickly, offering $5,000. Pierce advised me to reject it. "We can get much more at trial. The criminal case is strengthening our civil case." The trial was scheduled for June. In the meantime, the freeze finally ended. Temperatures returned to normal Texas winter weather, which meant 50s and 60s during the day. My hands recovered fully, though I'd had a few rough weeks where the pain persisted even after warming up. I also attended HOA meetings under the new president, a reasonable woman named Jennifer Martinez who worked as a school principal. She immediately revised the bylaws, adding protections for medical equipment and limiting the board's authority to enter properties. She also implemented a complaint process so residents could challenge violation notices. "The HOA should serve the community, not rule it," she said at her first meeting. "We're here to maintain property values and common areas, not to control every aspect of your lives." The change was dramatic. Suddenly, the HOA focused on actual community issues like street repairs and neighborhood safety, instead of measuring grass height and policing paint colors. Patricia's trial began in mid-June. I testified about what happened. The doctors testified about my medical condition, and several neighbors testified about Patricia's pattern of harassment. The defense argued she'd made an honest mistake and that her actions, while perhaps misguided, weren't criminal. The jury disagreed. After 3 days of deliberation, they found Patricia Henderson guilty of theft, criminal trespass, and harassment. She was acquitted on the more serious charges like breaking and entering because the jury felt the HOA bylaws had given her some authority to enter, even if she'd abused it. Judge Sullivan, who also presided over the criminal trial, sentenced Patricia to 6 months in county jail, 3 years probation, and 200 hours of community service. She was also ordered to pay restitution for my legal fees and medical expenses. Patricia looked stunned as the sentence was read. Richard sat in the gallery, his face pale. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but at what cost? Patricia's life was ruined. She'd lost her position, her reputation, and now her freedom. But as I left the courthouse that day, I remembered how she'd looked at me that morning in her doorway, dismissing my medical condition like it was an inconvenience to her schedule. I remembered the pain in my hands, the fear that I might suffer permanent damage. I remembered Richard's threats. No, I'd done the right thing. Sometimes standing up to bullies means watching them face consequences. That's not cruelty. That's accountability. The civil case settled a month later. The HOA's insurance company paid $75,000 to avoid a trial. After Pierce took his percentage and expenses were covered, I walked away with about $45,000. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to create an emergency fund and pay off some debt. More importantly, life in Willow Creek Estates improved dramatically. Jennifer's leadership transformed the HOA from an authoritarian nightmare into an actual community organization. We started having neighborhood barbecues and holiday parties. People who'd been afraid to socialize because Patricia might cite them for something now felt free to be neighborly. George introduced me to other neighbors I'd never met. I learned that Tom Bradley, whose garden Patricia had destroyed, was a retired veteran who'd been growing vegetables to donate to a food bank. The HOA, under Jennifer's leadership, formally apologized and helped him rebuild his garden, even designating a community plot for anyone who wanted to grow vegetables. The Martin family, whose dog Patricia had tried to have removed, became friends of mine. Their dog, a golden retriever named Buddy, was the gentlest animal I'd ever met. The idea that Patricia had tried to have him taken away because he barked during the day was ridiculous. Patricia served 4 months of her sentence before being released on good behavior. I saw her once after her release at a grocery store. She looked older, tired. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away and hurried down another aisle. I didn't follow her. There was nothing left to say. Richard divorced her 6 months later. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that he'd been humiliated by the whole situation and blamed her for destroying their social standing. They sold their house and left Willow Creek Estates. I never saw either of them again. As for me, I learned several important lessons. First, know your rights. HOA agreements are contracts, but they're not unlimited. No contract can override your basic rights to safety and medical treatment. Second, document everything. My photos, emails, and timeline were crucial to my case. Third, don't be afraid to stand up to bullies, even when it's uncomfortable or expensive. If I hadn't fought back, Patricia would still be terrorizing the neighborhood. And fourth, medical equipment is medical equipment, whether it's a wheelchair, an oxygen tank, or a heated blanket. Nobody has the right to take it, no matter what authority they think they have. I still live in Willow Creek Estates. My house is still the same modest ranch-style place on Maple Drive. But now, I actually enjoy living here. The neighborhood feels like a community instead of a prison run by a petty dictator. My heated blanket sits on my bed, right where it belongs. I use it every winter night, grateful that I can access the medical treatment I need without fear of someone breaking into my house and taking it. It sounds like such a simple thing, but after everything that happened, I never take it for granted. Last month, Jennifer asked if I'd consider joining the HOA board. I declined politely. I've had enough of HOA politics to last a lifetime. But I did volunteer to help with the Neighborhood Watch program and the annual community garage sale. I want to contribute to making this a good place to live, just without the bureaucracy and power struggles. Sometimes I think about Patricia and wonder if she learned anything from the experience. Did she realize how far over the line she'd gone? Does she understand that her need for control destroyed her own life? Or does she still see herself as the victim, unfairly persecuted for trying to do her job? I'll never know, and honestly, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the nightmare is over. I'm safe in my own home. I can use my medical equipment without interference, and my neighborhood is thriving under reasonable leadership. The whole experience taught me that institutions, even small ones like HOAs, are only as good or bad as the people running them. Patricia turned our HOA into a weapon for personal power. Jennifer turned it into a tool for community building. Same rules, same structure, completely different results. And it taught me that standing up for yourself, even when it's hard and scary and expensive, is always worth it. I could have just accepted Patricia's abuse, paid the fines, filled out her paperwork, and waited weeks for permission to use my own medical equipment. Many people would have. It would have been easier than fighting back, but easy isn't always right. Sometimes the right thing is also the hard thing. Sometimes you have to take a stand, hire a lawyer, go to court, and see it through to the end. Not because you want to, but because nobody else will do it for you. I'm proud that I fought back. I'm proud that Patricia faced consequences for her actions. And I'm proud that the neighborhood is better now because someone finally said enough is enough. As I sit here tonight, wrapped in my heated blanket, watching snow fall outside my window, another rare Texas winter storm, I feel grateful. Grateful for my health, for justice, for good neighbors, and for the simple right to stay warm in my own home without some power-hungry HOA president interfering. It's a small thing, really. A heated blanket. But it represents something much larger. Autonomy, dignity, and the fundamental right to make decisions about your own health and safety without arbitrary interference from people who think a title gives them unlimited authority. Patricia Henderson learned that lesson the hard way. She learned that authority has limits, that medical needs trump bylaws, and that actions have consequences. I hope she's doing okay now, wherever she is. I don't wish her ongoing harm, but I also don't regret holding her accountable for what she did. Justice isn't always pretty. It's not always satisfying, but it's necessary. And in this case, it worked exactly as it should. Someone abused their power, endangered another person's health, and faced appropriate consequences. The system, despite its flaws and delays, ultimately worked, and that gives me hope. Hope that when people stand up to bullies, when they fight for their rights, when they refuse to be intimidated into silence, good things can happen. Communities can improve. Wrongs can be righted. Justice can prevail. All because I refused to let someone steal my heated blanket and get away with it. Who knew such a small thing could lead to such big changes? But that's how change often happens. Not through grand gestures or dramatic revolutions, but through ordinary people standing up for themselves in everyday situations. One person saying, "No, this isn't right and I won't accept it." One person deciding that enough is enough. I was that person, and I'm glad I was.